they were doing an addition to their room, and I went talked to their foreman, and I said, "Hey, how much would you charge me to do a slab?" Right? But it was like 800 square feet behind his library, and I need to cover it. The guy is like, "Look, if you pay me $800 labor plus the materials, I'll build it for you." So I said, "All right, deal." I had the $800 because I made money, and my parents one day walk out to their yard and they start seeing that they're forming this slab behind their house. So they call me up and they said, "Dude, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna reproduce this fish."
We would like to thank our title sponsor, B1 Bank. B1 Bank knows that entrepreneurs like you are always thinking one step ahead. So you need banking solutions that can keep up. It begins with lending. Does your business need working capital or financing for new equipment? How about a real estate or a construction loan? Good news, the B1 lending team is ready to learn your goals and help you find the best lending option available. Now let's talk about uncomplicating your daily cash flow. B1 offers a full array of treasury management services that let you collect funds faster, pay funds more efficiently, and access your information with powerful online tools. Most importantly, B1 understands the value of working with local nonprofits to build a stronger community. They believe in giving back through hands-on involvement with their B1 Community Outreach Program because it's simply the right thing to do. B1 Bank. Be uncomplicated. To learn more, visit b1bank.com. Equal housing lender, member FDIC. Hello, I'm Andrew McClendon, your host of the Next Entrepreneur Podcast. We're here today in the Propel Production Podcast Studio in Baton Rouge, and we welcome our guest, Mr. Tupac de la Cruz. Tupac, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Andrew.
So you're the owner and chief operating officer of Roofing Solutions, a local roofing company that now ranks in the top 25 roofing contractors in the United States, which is very impressive.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations on all of your successes.
Thanks.
So I thought we'd start at the beginning.
Sure.
Back in Costa Rica as a young kid. So tell us what your life was like growing up in Costa Rica.
Sure. So I'm the youngest of three.
Yeah.
And my brothers we're 5 years apart.
Okay.
My mom is a doctor, and my dad is a retired university professor, but he's been in politics all his life. And it was pretty interesting because back in the day, my family was, my mom, pretty hard worker, both of them.
Right.
And somehow or another, I was pretty entrepreneurial since I was very little. Something that they supported from the day one. So if you go back from second grade, I used to trade like paper cards that this is this paper that has either smells or that you can write letters, and they will buy it for me so that I could sell it, and I'll bring this change at home.
That's awesome.
And over the period of years, that evolved to me selling candy at the school. And I had a pretty good operation. There was no cafeteria at the school back then, and there were no vending machines. So I'll bring this candy, I'll sell it, I'll go back home, I'll have all this cash and change. I'll tell my dad, "Hey, Dad, would you buy me more candy? And I'll keep the rest." And over a period of years, I had a pretty good operation to the point that the teachers will confiscate this candy, right? Because I wasn't supposed to do it. My dad would go get it and give it to me that night to go sell it the next day because he was so excited that I was doing this.
That's awesome.
So, fast forward a few years of me doing this, I got into the fish aquariums and of goldfish, and that was one of my hobbies. I was pretty good into it, and I would go to a local aquarium to go work on the weekends so that they could give me free stuff. They couldn't pay me because I was too young, so I couldn't be on payroll.
How old were you?
I was in 5th grade, 4th, 5th, 6th, so that had to be 1994, 11, 12, 11, between 11th and 13th year,
Okay.
kind of like that period of time. I get pretty good friends with the owner, who's a marine biologist. He was the supplier of all tropical fish in Costa Rica. He had a huge farm about 3 hours east of San Jose. And he started taking me to the farm. And I would get excited. I would go there, and this is like the Disney World of fish farming. You have you have ponds over ponds over ponds, different type of fish, at certain degrees. It was amazing. He had a pretty good operation.
Those indoor ponds or outdoor ponds?
It was outdoors, but it was more like a greenhouse. Yeah. So you had some type of covering.
Got it.
And the guy said, "Man, you know, I can do 90% of the species here, but one species." I'm like, why can you do that one species? Well, because the waters here are too warm. I need a cold water. So I'm like, man, you know, my parents live in a house that is in the mountains. It's pretty cold over there. What do we need? So, well, we just need such and such, so many gallons. And we need the temperature to be below, I don't know, maybe 68 degrees. And maybe his ponds were 80 back then. And I think we can get him reproduced. I'm like, all right. So I went home right after that one weekend, and I tell my parents, hey, I'm going to build some ponds back there. And they're like, sure. Like they don't capture what I'm thinking.
I'm going to turn your backyard into an enterprise.
That's right. So my dad has a pretty big library at his house. I mean, big is, I don't know, over 1,800 square feet, which is pretty large for a house. I mean, his library is amazing. But back then, they were doing an addition to their room, and I went up to their foreman, and I said, hey, how much would you charge me to do a slab? Right? But it was like 800 square feet behind his library, and I need to cover it. The guy is like, look, if you pay me $800 labor plus the materials, I'll build it for you. So I said, all right, deal. I had the $800 because I made money. And you know, my parents one day walk out to their yard, and they start seeing that they're forming this slab behind their house. So they call me up and they said, dude, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm going to reproduce this fish. I'm like, yeah, but this is our house. I'm like, I know, but we can always demo this. It's all right. So they let me do it.
Oh, that's
they
amazing.
let me do it. I end up buying these plastic poles, the ones that they sell at Walmart. We had 8 of them. I bought the equipment is relatively basic, and I had the goldfish
pumps and filters
and the water heads. They have this plant that I'm thinking in Spanish, the name, it's called lirio, but I don't, right now I'm trying to think how that's called. The LSU Lakes is full of that stuff. Right, right. Everything that is floating, but it has a pretty long root.
Right.
That if you put it there, the fish will mate and they'll put their eggs in this plant. So we imported the I guess the parents or the big fish.
Right.
And we put them in these pools, and within 60 days they started reproducing. And this guy is so excited about it that he bought all of my production and he exported it to Honduras because there was a big market for it.
Oh my goodness.
So here I am, at that time maybe 13 years old, making like $1,500 a month, which for a 13-year-old back then, $1,500 was a lot.
That's a lot of money.
So I was like loaded as far as, you know, having more cash I can spend. My parents were laughing like, man, this kid just does whatever and he just makes it happen. So it was pretty funny to see that. I did that for about 4 years.
That's amazing.
And sometime in 7th grade or 6th grade, I was hanging out with my cousin, and he lived in a house that every year there's a national holiday that Costa Rica, let's say 20% of the population walks to a church,
right?
And they all have to go through his house, right? Because it's through one road. I remember we were hanging out at his house, and I said, dude, why don't we sell stuff to these people that are walking? Because they got to be hungry and thirsty. So, I mean, this is kind of like my next entrepreneurial.
Right.
He's like, man, let's do it. So I tell my dad was always a supporter of this. He got all excited. He said, Dad, would you buy me, like some cupcakes and let me mix some like juice and I'll sell it by the cup. Back then, my grandmother was alive and she'll bake a lot of this stuff for me. So she'll be baking it. I'll buy it for her. She charge me just something symbolic for the sake of it. But they'll bring this. Within an hour, we were sold out. I'm like, man, we have something going on here. So I tell my dad, hey, when you go to the supermarket and just buy as many as you can of pastries and bring me Cokes and whatever you can get with, maybe I gave him $300 and he comes with a bunch of stuff. He drops it off and 3 hours later, we're sold out again. So the next year, I'm like, man, you tell my cousin, why don't we do this again? And we started doing it progressively year over year.
Right.
Okay. My oldest brother at the time worked for Unilever, which is a massive consumption company. And he's like, dude, why don't you contact like the Mockler Beverage of Costa Rica and see if they can give you some tents. And why don't you call Coke and see if they'll give you the tubs to put their drinks? And I said, sure. So I called them up. This is 13-year-old kid saying, hey, I want to do this. And they're like, dude, how are you? I'm 13. Well, we need an 18-year-old to sign the contracts. They, of course, turned me down. Coke said, sure, I'll give you the tubs. You got to buy it from me. So on our 4th year, we had tents from Coke and we had their tubs. We would start, my parents would let me skip school because you had to work the day that people are walking to. The next day is the holiday. So they'll let me skip school to do this.
Right.
And it went from us working let's say 16-hour shift whenever we started to a 24-hour shift, and from one tent to multiple tents. And in our last year, we will rent toilets, we will rent chairs to people to sit on. We had all the inventory that we had was in concession, so everything that we didn't use, I will return back to the suppliers. And we had multiple stands throughout this route, and we were killing it. We probably made 12 grand on our last day each, is me and my cousin, and we had employees, which were some of our friends, and they will skip school and they got all excited making $100 for this 24-hour shift, and we were killing it.
That's amazing.
This is all high school we did it, and it was super fun. Sometime in 10th grade, which 10th grade is our junior year in Costa Rica, the city burners show up in the world. This is the 1998 boom of Microsoft going crazy, all the compact companies going crazy. So I had my middle brother who used to collect CDs, his best friend who's a hardcore software programmer who had Windows 98, everything that was available back then. I walked the convention of computers with my dad, and they start seeing all this. He's a Macintosh hardcore fan. So back in the day when Apple wasn't cool, he had one.
Right.
And he had one in 1986 when it was just showing up. So we grew up with Apples.
Right.
So I tell Dad, look how cool, you put a CD in this machine and it will spit you out a copy of the same CD. Fun story is these things are like $1,500 a piece back then.
Wow.
I buy 2 of them. And my dad is the dude, what are you going to do with this? I said, and my brother has, 250 CDs. And his best friend has all this software and games. So I guess I can reproduce and sell them. And look, they're about $150 a piece for a software back then, and there was nothing about piracy. We didn't know anything. I mean, I was a 15-year-old back then.
Yeah.
So he's like, all right, cool, let's buy it. So I go from having the fish in their house to having this thing once per year for this holiday, to now I'm this guy that has CDs and like have software to sell, and I will finance it to people just because they didn't have $100, but they wanted to buy that one software or that one game, and I have professors buying this software from me. I was killing it. So during my senior year, I did that. I don't know, 8 months into it, and I had to make. I don't know. I had cash. I had cash, and I had built cash. So, I had my oldest brother tells my parents, "Hey, you may want to look into this guy not studying here and studying abroad, because there's a big chance that if I would have studied there, I would get complacent, and then I'll live at their house, and I was comfortable there."
Yeah.
It's not uncommon in our countries to have help at the house, and it's pretty sweet. You don't have to work much. The chores are taken care of, and you could get lazy pretty fast.
Right.
But I was pretty ambitious.
So you didn't really think about going to the U.S. till you're about a senior in high school?
No, I was. My mom is hardcore. Okay, she's very strict, very disciplined, and she tells me this story that she became a doctor when it was uncommon for women to become doctors. Mm-hmm. So she had a lot of pushback, but her dad was a doctor, and her dad said, "I don't expect anything less from you," and she had that pressure, and she supported her brothers, and her family which is my family, was a little bit dysfunctional, like most of our families anyways.
Right.
And there was some alcoholism on her side of the family that she had to deal with siblings and her father, and she just grew up very tough, dealing with that. And she said, "Look, if you want to succeed in life, you can succeed here, but there'll be a longer process to get there, because it's very hard to succeed in our countries. There's no easy access to financing. Economies are very small. Infrastructure is not easy. Just the access to financing is complicated. Right. If you want to buy a house, there's no 30-year mortgages. They want you to put 50-60% cash. Mm-hmm. They'll, on top of the loan, they'll put a life insurance policy. They have something equivalent to the PMI charge that they have. I mean, it's so expensive, and interest rates are above 10%. So if you want to be a business owner, you have a really hard time.
Right.
And my parents said, "Look, we want you to succeed. You do well. I think you're going to do well anywhere you go." And my oldest brother kept pushing, saying, "Hey, we need him to go out. Let's see what happens." And they always raised us saying, the only inheritance you're going to get from us is your education. And sure they did. I mean, they worked so hard to get my brothers. Oldest brother has 2 MBAs.
Wow.
My middle brother went to study at Penn State, and he went abroad to England, and then I came to the U.S. to study.
That's amazing. So how did you find Louisiana?
So I'll tell you a little bit about Louisiana in a minute. So my oldest brother he's very intellectual. He always reading about what's out there in the trends, and said, "Hey, you may want to check into this school or these schools in the US." And back then there was no internet. It was all US news, the magazine.
Right.
And this is in my junior year. And I reach out to these schools through letters. And they replied to me and said, "Look, if you want to qualify to enter here, you need to get these requirements." So I reach out to several of them, one of them being UPenn. in Philadelphia. And they told me, hey, we need these grades on the SAT, these grades on the TOEFL, which is a Spanish or an English language, or I don't remember what it translates to, but it's an exam for foreigners to see how their English is. So I'm like, okay, so how do I study for this? So I got into a program with it's called like it's like an international U.S. cultural center. So I get into some courses with those guys on how to improve my English. I didn't realize how bad it was until I did the exams, and I sucked miserably. So I called UPenn and say, look, I have a problem. My math is great, but my English sucks. But let me tell you something. I make more money than the average Costa Rican here since I'm 12. And they got excited about it. So they accepted me at UPenn with one condition. You have to go through this business language program, and you need to do 2 economics classes that if you do well, we'll admit you. I'm like, deal. So this center...
Before you actually went to there?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is about I would say 8 months before I was graduating from high school.
So you would do those courses in those 8 months?
Right.
Yeah.
No. This is on my first semester over there.
Okay, got it.
So my application was contingent upon me doing that.
Okay.
So I go there, go to UPenn on spring of 2000. I was 16 years old. I graduated high school when I was 16. And it was miserably cold. Philadelphia is very, very cold. I was going from everything gets done at the house to, hey, how do I use a washer and a dryer? Right?
Yeah.
So it was miserable. So long story short, I'm in this business ESL program with a bunch of very cool people. And, I get to a dorm. When I got to the dorm, I was expecting pillows and blankets and towels and dishes. And I'm like, man, all I got here is a mattress. So I don't have a microwave, I don't have nothing. And I remember, I went to to the person who's in charge of the dorm and said, like, well, you need to go to Kmart and get all that. So how do I get to Kmart? Well, you take the metro, 7 or 8 stations down the road, you buy it. I'm like, but what about the microwave and the little fridge? Do I need to bring it back to the metro? Yeah, there was no Uber, no nothing, no Amazon, that didn't exist. So I tell my roommate back then from Venezuela, I said, Luis, let's go buy this because we're going to cook here. And I would see that in this dorm, every 2 months, people would rotate because they'll the business ESL was a 2-month program. So people will finish and they will leave. And they will throw everything, all their stuff away. These are typically UPenn is expensive for foreigners, and they were well-off people, and they just throw it away. They didn't care. So I'm like, Luis, do you see what I'm seeing? He's like, what are you seeing? Well, I mean, all these people are throwing away fridges and microwaves and plates and dishes and blankets and towels, and we're about to go buy all that at Kmart. Why don't we just offer him something?
Right.
And do you mind if I store something at the dorm? He's like, no. So I basically went and bought everybody's fridge, everybody's microwave, plates, everything, and I stashed all of that in the dorm. So you walk in our dorm, and our living room was full of microwaves and fridges and towels and blankets and anything, so that I could sell it to the people coming in the program. Anyways, I made a kill.
Oh my God.
I made a killing at UPenn. But long story short, I do the ESL, I do the economics class. I was always a guy who would pay attention in class, and I did okay. I was never a straight A guy.
Right.
Because I didn't put the effort into studying, but I would pay attention. And UPenn taught me the lesson that I had to put my effort into it, because the professors would say, we have quizzes tomorrow, chapters 1 through 5. So I have all these Chinese and Indians right next to me. They could read 100 pages every night, easy. They'll memorize them, but they could not speak anything to you. They had no social skills. They had no soft skills, but they'll make an A. And of course, I go there, do the test. I failed miserably because I could not read 100 pages every night.
Yeah.
And I called my mom. I said, Mom, I think you're about to blow up a bunch of money here. He's like, no, you just want an excuse to come back.
Not happening.
Not happening. You figure it out. I'm like, no, I'm serious. You're about to blow a lot of money. And she said, look, let's make a deal. So she said, I don't want you back in Costa Rica. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I go back to the cultural center that I went through the classes. And I said, guys, I'm not going to do well here, because clearly I cannot read 100 pages every night. It's not my thing. And they said, well, I don't know if you remember, but you applied to this thing and it had all of these colleges that had approved you. I'm like, okay, send me the list. Because my mom said everywhere but Florida. She was afraid that I would go to Miami and go crazy.
Yeah.
And back then, I start reading the list of all these colleges I've never heard of. And I see Louisiana State University. And I open U.S. News. And Louisiana State University in 2000 was the #1 party school in the country. So I said, look, I'm not a party guy. Philadelphia is super boring, but I need to go south fast because it's so cold here and I'm miserable.
We would like to thank Castro Real Estate Services for sponsoring the Next Entrepreneur podcast. Castro Real Estate Services is a full-service real estate brokerage firm based in Baton Rouge. They can handle commercial and residential transactions in Baton Rouge and the surrounding areas. Need to buy or sell real estate? Call the company that cares about you. Castro Real Estate. Turnkey Solutions is a nationwide cybersecurity and IT systems expert, providing the services that growing businesses need to stay ahead of hackers, hurricanes, and IT nightmares. With 24/7 support teams and offices across Louisiana and Texas, they bring peace of mind to companies of all sizes. Their 5-star rated team provides lightning-fast IT support with the cybersecurity and business continuity solutions today's businesses demand. When you're looking for a technology partner to provide you with peace of mind, find out more by calling them at 225-224-6594 or chat with them online at www.tks.la/NXT. We would like to thank MBD Automation for their support of the Next Entrepreneur podcast. MBD Automation is a mechanical install contractor with a program-centric focus. So what do these guys do? They install conveyor systems, VRCs, platforms, singulators, sorters, and all sorts of other types of automated equipment. Who do they work for? They work for systems integrators, manufacturers, and end users in fulfillment centers, airports, mail processing facilities, and projects in the defense industry. MBD Automation works for numerous Fortune 500 companies across the United States and has a list of international clients that they perform work for in the U.S. as well. If MBD Automation can help you on your next project, you can find them online at mbdautomation.com. Okay, so you made it to LSU.
I made it to LSU. The deal with my mom is don't go south. I mean, don't go to Miami. Don't come to Costa Rica. I said, look, I promise I'll finish in 2.5 years, or in 3 years. In 3 years, I made that promise. I transferred down to LSU, typical school. If you pay attention and you do well, you do okay. I started in finance, and because that was my aspiration was to end up in Wall Street, and I do that for about 2 years. I go work for Citibank as an analyst, And the guy that I wanted...
Or after college?
No, as an intern.
Okay,
as an intern. So as an intern, I go to Citibank to work there. And the guy who had the position I wanted, I said, dude, how long did it take you to get there? And he told me 10 years. I'm like, oh, man. So I came back, changed majors, went into marketing.
Really?
Yeah. So I went from finance to marketing. I talked to the dean at LSU, and I said, look, I've been having a 3.0 or above. I was in the dean's list. Would you let me I was taking 18 hours, and would you let me take 21? He said, yes, as long as you maintain your GPA above 3.0. And I said, deal. So he lets me enroll in 21 hours. So I had 21 hours and working full-time. And full-time work for international guys was 20 hours. I was breaking it a little bit because I would waiter on the side for free so that I could make tips. And if I didn't get a tip, I was pissed. But hey, you learn how to treat people.
Right.
So I recommend that to anybody. And while I'm in marketing, I go work for Disney World. They have a program to be a cast member, is what they call it. But it was pretty interesting. I went there in my senior year. And while I'm there, I was taught about retailing and how they do it. And they made us do a program there for their retail. I was in Adventureland, dressed as a pirate. So it was pretty cool. I came back and we had a management class that you had to sit on the same spot every class. And I had a guy from a roofing company that sat down right next to me. He was 8 years older than me. We hit it off, and on my presentations in that class, it was always on why small companies cannot grow. So middle of the semester, he says, hey, would you come work for me part-time and see if you can help me some and all that. He had a pretty admirable background, like 18 siblings, all came from El Salvador through the exit of the war, very hardworking family. And I said, sure. So I'm like, yeah, it's a roofing company, whatever. You don't think about roofing or construction when you're in college the way it actually is. So I end up working for the guy. I'm graduating that December. And I had an offer to go work for McIlhenny. And this guy tells me, hey, I'll pay you the same. And I'll give you the visa to stay here working. And I said, that's fine.
The same as McElhaney would have offered you?
Yeah, but McElhaney said, come work for a year. I had a 1 year permit to stay here. McElhaney said, hey, if we like you, you can stay. If we like you, we may process the visa. And I'm like, you know what? I would rather go for the sure thing. I really didn't have no desire to go back to Costa Rica. And I got into roofing. So it was pretty interesting. He had a small operation back then. Maybe he was selling under 3 million. I was like employee number 18. And they were labor only residential contractors. And the first thing I do is he hired me as a marketing manager. And I do something called a profit pool report. And I was taught how to do that at Citibank. And essentially what it does is you segment every piece of the industry. You got residential new construction, residential re-roofing, commercial new construction, commercial re-roofing, industrial, service. And you analyze how much profit is in each category. So I tell this guy, look, I know you're killing it because this is in the housing boom between 2003 plus.
Right.
But you're in the worst bucket because you don't make any profits on your materials because the home builders are buying it. And all you can mark up is your labor. And you got to do a lot of volume. So, what would you suggest you do? Said, I think we need to put more money and resources into residential re-roofing. He was 15 years into it back then, into that business. They started that business in 92, so that's 12 years. And they started to re-roof some of the houses that they roofed originally.
Oh, wow.
Because the shingles only last 12 to 15 years. So I'm like, look at how much money you make on one house here, and look how much new construction houses you got to do here to make this much money on a re-roof. So he's like, all right, you're going to be in charge of that. I'm like, okay, cool. So we grew from maybe one house every 2 weeks to 5 houses a day at one point. But I was going crazy. I couldn't deal with the homeowners. I couldn't deal with the wives because some of them are unreasonable. And some people would try to do whatever it takes to cheat out the contractor. Finally, at some point in that process, I do the house for a project manager of a back then prominent construction company. And he calls me up and said, hey, you were the PM of my house. I need your help on a commercial building. I'm like, sure, I'll go to your house. I go to your office. So I go there. He opens the plans. At this point, I've never, ever read through a set of plans in my life because I was, hey, come put your roof, and the shingles were there and you just nailed it. So I show up to his house, to his office. He shows me the plans. Here I'm a guy who's getting paid on commission. And I see this massive school that is all shingles, over 1,200 squares of shingles. So that you have an idea, an average house is 30 squares. Right. So I'm like, okay, if I sell this right now, I'm making 40 times my commission. So his name is Wesley. And I said, Wesley, what's up? Oh, I got these 3 jobs. The roofer went out of business and they need a roofer. And you guys did a good job in my house. I'm like, yeah, but I've never done commercial roofing and I don't know the paperwork. And we made a deal. He's like, look, I'll help you with the paperwork. You help me with the pricing. And I said, sure, I'll go teach my shingle guys how to install commercial roofing, which is flat roofs and metal roofs and everything else. So I signed the contract, all excited. All I was looking was at the contract amount. I didn't know if that contract amount we were to make money or lose money. And we started there. And funny thing is,
now you're doing materials and labor in this?
Materials and labor.
Yeah.
Now he tells me where I need to be on pricing. Now back then I didn't realize he was like, dude, you're not making any money on it. But I was excited because I was on commission. Right. So we sold the business, signed up on it, and I go to the pre-installation meeting, which I've never had any of these. Right. And I'm here. This is a 21-year-old, never opened a set of plans in his life. I have all the trades on the table. CSRS was the owner's rep. Sam Herping with Remsen Haley was the architect. And I remember a guy, he's passed, but his name is Tim Lacey, was the roofer consultant for CSRS. And Tim said, all right, Mr. Wesley, I heard that you have a new roofer. Yeah, such and such. Where are his submittals? And I innocently said, Tim, what's a submittal? And I could hear the crickets on the room. And he's like, well, I'll do those for him. So after the meeting, I'm like, dude, what's the submittal? Well, use the product data that you're going to use. I'm like, but this is just a shingle roof. Well, but you got to provide it and you got to get it approved. Anyways, I submitted a shingle, a residential shingle, and it gets rejected. I'm like, Wes, this is a shingle roof, and they rejected it. Well, you need to use a lifetime shingle. So I go back to the supplier, and he's like, hey, by the way, that lifetime shingle is twice as much as the regular shingle. I'm like, whoa. Hey, we have another meeting about the roofing. Tim Lazy again. Hey, where is your certification? I'm a certification for what? Well, to nail shingles. I'm like, Tim, you don't get it, man. I'm the largest residential installer of shingles in the state. We hand nail our shingles. What certification are you talking about? He's like, well, you're going to have a certification because you're going to have to issue me a warranty. I'm like, oh my God. So I go back to the supplier, GAF, and I go through the approved contractors, no one that I knew.
Now, this is the original meeting was the pre-construction conference. The pre-construction conference. You've got time to do this, right?
No time. I mean, I have maybe 30 to 45 days to figure it out, right? Because this is not, I see where they're putting the trusses. So this is coming up fast.
Oh, it was like a pre-roofing conference.
It was like, let's say, the pre-construction where they introduced me as the new roofer, and the second one is the pre-installation.
Right.
And I end up hiring this group of rednecks, no offense, and they show up with shorts and tennis shoes, no shirts, and they just start banging shingles, but they were approved. They were approved, and they had the certification. So I had to pay, if my budget was 30 cents on the dollar, I ended up paying like $1.10.
Oh my goodness.
We took a beating so bad that my previous employer got scared and said, hey, we need to set up a new LLC because we don't want you to take down our main business.
Right.
And I said, sure. And that's when Roofing Solutions is set up, because they were so afraid that I was going to take down their business that we set it up. So in a period of 2 years, I made every mistake that you can imagine. I had to learn the hard way to read plans, specs. I didn't acknowledge addendums. And then I had to eat many things. Every mistake that you can possibly do, to the point that the guy who was a partner in there got out of it and wanted to shut down Roofing Solutions because we weren't making money. The guy who I met at LSU trusted me and said, look, what do you want to do? I'm like, look, I've done this for 2 years. Well, every mistake that I'm making is not new. It's a different mistake. It would be foolish to shut it down right now. So over a period of, he's like, all right, let's keep it. And I said, let's keep it, but let me buy you out as we go.
Right.
And we became 50-50 partners at one point. And in 2008, we had a disagreement. He wanted to use the company as a cash cow. I wanted to grow the company. Commercial construction is cash intensive, requires a lot of working capital. And we have a disagreement, and within a bad conversation, I end up buying the guy out. And Hurricane Isaac hit in 2008, and we end up with the contract at LSU to redo the whole thing. Funny thing is, when I buy this guy out on a Friday, I take a flight to Costa Rica to go see my family. And I come back, and he had shut down the lines of credit. He has sent a letter to all the suppliers saying that he was no longer guarantor of the accounts. So my company became cash on delivery. And here I have a massive contract to go fulfill, and I had no cash. So I took the risk. I went with it. 3 weeks into a lot of payroll, I'm running out of payroll. I'm swinging my credit card with, back then, I still have it. I never use it. It's a Bank of America, pretty high limit. I put the fund, like I did a check advance, put it in the account, kept paying the suppliers, trying to work with everybody. One thing with the Cruz is, if you don't pay the crew on Saturday, they're not there on Friday, they're not going to show up on Monday.
Right.
So you're screwed. So I made it sure that they had cash, to the point that I told my people, look, I only have payroll funds for 2 more weeks. So I advise all of you to go find other jobs, because I think I'm just going to run out of cash. So I go back to my office and I'm like, man, I need cash and I don't know where to get it from. And I look into paperwork that I had there. This is in 2008, let's say September. Sometime in 2006, I was invited to invest in a startup community bank. And I had the paperwork there. So I'm like, man, I forgot about this. So I had put, like, let's say $5,000 or 10, and okay, this bank is down the road. 2008 is the crisis, right? Crisis about to hit hard. So I go knock on their door and say, guys, I think I'm a shareholder. This old lady here in the front, I've never seen you, but let me check into the shareholder rooster. So she's like, yeah, sure, you're here. Let me let you talk to the lender. And I go there. His name is Scott. I said, Scott, I need cash ASAP. He saw my desperation, which is not a good thing in banking. No. Never. But I said, look, this is my business. We're making money. I have this contract. I need working capital. They did their writing, and within 2 weeks he had given me a line of credit that was like
solid gold.
Solid gold. So we were able to breathe and fulfill all our obligations back then. And that saved me. So we grew like crazy that year. We doubled. And I told my brother, who at this time is in Mexico working for Coke, higher up, very successful. And I said, dude, I need help because I'm growing too fast in the field, but my inside of the house, or the front of the house, back of the house,
right,
my internal processes are a disaster. So for 2 years he consulted with me, and he'll charge me very marginal today, but back then I would feel like, I'm like, man, you're ripping me off, but you're my brother. And the funny thing is, we had a weird relationship growing up because he's 10 years older. So by the time I remember him, when I was 6, he was leaving the house. So it's kind of like one of those that is my brother, but it's not my brother because we never played together. Right. But he was very successful, and I always admire him. And he started helping me in a period of 2 years, and I convinced him to become a partner of Roofing Solutions.
That's Lautaro?
This is Lautaro, yeah. So in 2010, we had a meeting as a partners and said, look, we have 2 choices. We can cash cow this thing or we can grow it. And we both are growth-minded guys. He comes definitely from a growth mindset in mass consumption industries, and we decided to grow. And it's funny because it was a very humbling moment for him. He comes as a partner, killing money, being paid as an expatriate in Mexico, and all of a sudden, there were situations that we didn't have cash to pay ourselves. And he's like, oh man, I gotta go tell my wife that I didn't get paid today because we didn't have cash. And the reality is, he's like, dude, welcome to business ownership. Yeah. Because sometimes there's none for us. And over a period of time, he second guessed for a few years where he made the right decision. Right. And I said, look, the only thing I can tell you is we have freedom that otherwise you wouldn't have. Yeah. And it's in our control to succeed. Okay. And people who never gives up is hard to beat. And we're not some that we're going to give up. And, testament from our parents. My mom was work 100 hours a week until she was 70. And she never gave up any minute.
I was going to ask, you started off by talking about your parents both being hard workers. Do you feel like you got your work ethic equally from both of them or more from your mother?
Yeah, so both are hard workers. So my dad worked 46 years as a professor in 2 different universities, public universities, which are very prestigious. And he worked as a political advisor to, I would say, for every president since 1996. So presidents in Costa Rica change every 4 years. Right. And as far as I can remember, he worked for every single one of them as an advisor. And he was an ambassador of Costa Rica in Venezuela when the Chavez crisis was between 2006 and 2008. And the president at the time felt that my dad was the only one who could build a relationship between Venezuela and Costa Rica, which he did very successfully. So he's always had this very prestigious career. Hard worker as far as he was always working and he was always teaching, and very, very ethical, very, with his demeanor and the way in which he would act. And he's always in every day he has 2 interviews in the morning and 2 interviews in the afternoon.
No way. After
COVID. And before that, it was 1 in the afternoon, 1 because he had to transport himself. But now because there's Zoom and Teams and all this, and it's everything about the world's economic policy, political matters throughout the world. He wrote, I don't know, over 40, 50 books. He's very intellectual guy. So
50-50? I mean, yeah.
50-50. I would say that hardworking, hardcore, grinding every day was my mom. Yeah. And the more strategic and charismatic side, I consider myself an introvert. But he's super extrovert. he goes at anywhere, and people take pictures with him, and he, it's so funny to be around him, and I pick on him.
Yeah, that's awesome. Pivotal is pleased to sponsor the Next Entrepreneur podcast. Pivotal is a commercial building contractor that performs new building construction, building maintenance, tenant improvements, renovations, and additions. Pivotal has been in business for over 25 years. The Pivotal team is simply the best. They have an impeccable safety record, and they crush schedules. A focus on quality and professional communication is at the root of their success. Pivotal also performs programs for clients who build in multiple markets, with current projects in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. If you are looking for the perfect addition to your project team, a contractor who can deliver the results you need to succeed, Pivotal is a one. When it's critical, call Pivotal. They can be found online at pivotalperforms.com. This podcast is sponsored by Mayhall, Fondren Blaze, a Louisiana business litigation firm, offering sophisticated legal advice that is tailored to meet the needs of their individual clients, including a wide variety of litigation, complex business negotiations, corporate formations, closings, and title examination. As leading entrepreneurs, your valuable time and resources should align with the expertise of MFB, a Louisiana practice made for business. Learn how we can work with you at www.mfbfirm.com. All right, let's talk about growth. You've grown your business tremendously over the years, but it's a hard business. You got Latoro in, you guys get things ironed out. You start to spread your work around. What does it take to open a second location? What does that look like?
Okay, so back in the day, back in 2010, when Latoro came on board, we started deciding how we're going to grow this thing. Naturally, was going from a smaller city to a bigger city. And we look into New Orleans, we were doing a lot of work there. And we decided just to put a flagship there. His belief was, if there's enough work in Baton Rouge for you to be successful, there's got to be 2 times or 3 times more in New Orleans. The construction company that we were working for had work there. So it was very inefficient for our project managers and our superintendents and our crews to be driving back and forth. So we decided to open that office. That office was very successful, very fast. Of course, with that growth, it had challenges because you need working capital, and it's all about the people. The success in a business is your people. It's not your equipment. It's not how many trucks you got. It's not your systems. It's the quality of the people that you have.
Right. And
you build your people, and you create a culture that everybody's aligned. I remember for many years, between 2010 and 2014, Lautaro struggled because most of the decisions had to go through me, because I had the technical knowledge. I knew how to deal with troubleshooting issues. I knew the business in and out, and every decision had to go through me, and he that was very frustrating for him.
Right.
And I said, look, if we can get people, if he said, if I can reproduce you fast enough, we can expand the business quickly.
Right.
And I said, yes, but you're going to need to create a culture. And of course, at this point, I have no knowledge of human resources. In the world of an entrepreneur, as they are starting, the human resources position is the people who arrange the cake for birthdays. And of course, just because you're never exposed to the true human resources.
Right.
But on his world, human resources is about talent development and pipeline development and culture. And he kept telling me about that, and I was biased because I'm like, what is he talking about? Right. And I got the idea. I read through it, and I learned that human resources was important.
Right.
In 2014, we have a manager that said, hey, I think you guys should put a program in place that is predictable so that we all act the same way. And he brought the suggestion about the 7 habits of highly effective people from Stephen Covey. And I was very skeptical very expensive, right? It's what you perceive expensive, but you don't realize as an entrepreneur how expensive it is to have a bad employee. It's super expensive.
Right.
So I say that 10 years mature.
Right.
Back then it was, man, we don't need this expense. We need more roofers to go put more roofs down.
Right.
And we started doing it. And I started as a participant, and I became helpers of the facilitators over the years. And we decided that every person that joins our company has to go through the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People program. And as of today, 96% of the company is certified. And I'm leaving there at 4% because you're always hiring people that are not. But as soon as we get, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people, we'll do the class or the course. That's how you create culture. And that's how you make it to where people in other states or people in other offices behave the way they need to behave. They make the right decisions or the best decisions that they can make, and that you don't become a funnel on every decision. And between 2014 and today, we invest tremendous amount of money in developing people, developing talent. Not only that we do the 7 Habits, we have the Futures Executive Institute with NRCA that we enroll an employee every 3 years. That's a program, a 3-year program. Since 2008, we have guys that we have paid their MBAs. We have a tuition reimbursement program. Anybody who wants to study will reimbursed as long as it's aligned with what the company needs. And, people value those things.
That's fantastic. How many employees do you have?
So in the US, close to 100. In Costa Rica, close to 85. And if you add the subcontractors, maybe close to 600.
Wow.
Yeah. So with the subcontractors, we work with those guys on safety and leadership development, because they need to learn how to lead their people.
Right.
And typically, we're very successful if you teach your guys and develop your guys. Your output is greater.
So how many offices have you built up to now?
So we have two in Alabama, 1 in Mississippi, and 4 in Louisiana right now, and the 1 in Costa Rica.
That's fantastic. So in Costa Rica, you guys are roofing?
We don't roof in Costa Rica. What we say, the Costa Rica office was created by an accident. Back in 2012, when we started doing the heavy work in New Orleans, we were doing a job that Jacobs Engineering was the owner's rep. And they specifically said that every trade had to do BIM modeling on every trade. We couldn't find anybody to do that in the US. And we found somebody who Lautaro I think it's Lautaro's nephew on his wife's side, that said, hey, I know how to do that. I think I can do it. He did that for us. And he did that for us at a lesser rate that we had anticipated. And then once the job was, his task was completed, he started helping us in estimating and shop drawings. And I said, this is pretty interesting. Along those years, there is an architect called Henry Carville. And Henry, we became pretty good friends. We were doing the school of Antioch, which is Woodland Elementary School. And he was so pissed at me because he's like, dude, you're just copying these submittals from the manuals from the manufacturers. I want job-specific shop drawings. And I want that on every job that I do with you. So we start doing those out of Costa Rica. And we realized that in Costa Rica, we could hire a 5-year architect at a rate that we will hire here a 2-year drafter if you were lucky,
right?
If you could find it.
Right.
Over a period of time between 2012 and 2015, we started growing that office as we were growing in the US.
That is fantastic. So you have estimating that happens out?
So fast forward 10 years from today, Lautaro runs that office, and we have 100% of accounting, accounts payable, accounts receivable, reconciliation, payroll, everything. All finance. We have in-house attorneys. I'll explain the attorneys in a minute, but that will do the contract review,
right.
deal with all the risk management of the company. We have all of the shop drawings and submittals. 90% of the estimators are there. Purchasing, and I would say half of project management is there. So
that is fantastic.
If a change order, RFI, pay up needs to be created, those guys create it.
That's fantastic, man.
At an incredible speed.
Yeah, that is amazing. You've expanded your business. You guys have grown. There's so much we could talk about, but I did wanted to dial into your involvement in an industry association that you now have chaired for a couple of terms, I believe.
That's right. So
I was going to ask you, what is that association and when did you start with it?
Yeah, so back in 2008, when I was learning the commercial world, Louisiana is very interesting because Louisiana is the one state that roofing contractors don't get along. Why? I don't know. This is because back in the day, there was too much different ethnicity groups, and they just never get along. And I could never ask somebody to help me. So I reached out to, and we were members, and I didn't know that NRCA existed. And I reached out to them for technical expertise, and they said, yeah, we have 90 years back then, or 110 years of information. So I got involved. I did the FEI 3-year class. The woman who created that program, I said, Lisa, how can I get involved with this? Because what I'm seeing here is this association is where everybody retires to. When you retire from your roofing company, you go to the association. That's what I was perceiving. Right. And she said, yeah, we need young people. So she helps me get involved. I finished in 2011, my 3-year program, and they asked me if I could be in part of committees. So I was in committees from 2011 to 2016 when they asked me to become part of the board. So I do the board between 2016, the dates may be off a little bit, but between 2016 and 2019. In 2019, they asked me if I could be part of the executive board. There's only 6 of us. And this is the association that has 3,800 members, and we oversee all the technical education, advocacy, and everything that is related to the industry goes through them. And we represent 50,000 roofing contractors. That's how many there's in the US. And I was an executive director for 3 years. I stepped down. They asked me if I could be back in the board. And I'm back in the board for a 2-year term. And I'm chairing right now anything that has the Hispanic initiatives, because 80% of our labor force is Hispanic.
Right.
They are underrepresented in the association. So I have that task to go and create something to attract these guys, because they can benefit so much, just like I did back in 28.
So I read that one of your initiatives was to get the manuals into Spanish. Is that right?
That's right. So NRCA changes CEO in 2016, and Rick Ribble, a former senator, said, "Hey, what do you see here?" Because I'm new to the NRCA. He's an older roofer. He sold his business, got into politics, and I said, "Reed, everything you guys do is great, but we cannot teach the installers how to do these things. There's nothing for them in Spanish." So he agrees. He buys into it. And we get funding from the association to translate all the manuals into Spanish. So today, everything on how to install a roof is in Spanish. So if a roofer wants to, it is there.
Tupac, that's amazing.
It took us 2.5 years to get all of that translated.
Yeah, that is fantastic. What a difference a able-bodied board member can make. And that's phenomenal. That's really a great insight. So as we start to wrap up, when you think of your life-work balance, how do you think you do in that way?
Life-work balance. You know what? You wish sometimes things have happened differently back early in my career. I wish I had mentors that would have just told me, "Hey man, just be patient,
right,
and be focused." And I learned that the hard way. I worked like a maniac for the first 15 years. I still work a lot differently today. I have 3 boys, and I enjoy every bit of them, every bit of time with them. And I spend a lot of time. I'm very active. They live in Costa Rica. I see them every month. And when I'm there, they're with me, and we have an amazing time. But for many years, I didn't understand work-life balance.
Right.
And I didn't respect other people's time. And I would call them at 10 o'clock at night because I had a question. And I would say that after I got divorced in 2018, but it was about a 2-year process, I realized that, all this hard work, and it wasn't worth it. So through the hard way, I came back to the US in 2018. I say the US because they were living in Costa Rica, and I was flying back and forth. So I came back, and I started doing stuff that I really wanted to do. And the business, investing in the employees like we were supposed to, start paying off. And the business was thriving. I didn't have to work like crazy. I wasn't the funnel anymore. And I started to work more strategically on how to build people rather than, hey, go put this fire off, go put this fire off.
Right.
Because if I could teach this guy how to do it, he can do it on his own.
Yeah.
And not only will I have more time for developing more people, but he'll have time to make the right call. And I feel today that between spending the time with my kids and doing what I really like to do, I have a very well-balanced life as far as work-life balance.
And you're a very young man. You're a young man.
Yeah.
You're a youngish man.
I'm 40. So, I mean, maybe young for some, not young for others, but yeah, it's.
No, what I'm saying is that's a great part of in life to have figured out how to live right. I mean, we all go through those struggles earlier on, but if you can hit that around 40, you're doing a great thing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about last question here. Your vision for as you look 5 and 10 years out for Roofing Solutions. What do you see?
Very interesting, because if you would have asked me 10 years ago where you see your business, I would have never seen it where it is today. Just because I always say there was no way that Louisiana could support a contractor this large. There was not enough. There's the market is there, but you had to lower your prices so much or you would be losing money. So when you say, where do you see it 5 to 10 years? There's been a lot of consolidation in the industry. And what we see is we're going to continue to grow because we're successful at it. And some of these consolidators are going to fail because what they're doing is they're rolling up all these companies as fast as they can with no strategic on how they're going to integrate culture. They can integrate systems, but they're losing a lot of key people. And these key people are becoming available. And our plan is we're going to continue to hire the key people to continue to expand. Because the way in which we're set up, we can open more offices with the support of the Costa Rican office. Because as we grow in the US, we have a back office that is supporting the staff here. So as long as we continue to see and find the key managers, we're going to continue to grow.
Man, what a fantastic story. Yeah. Tupac, it has been a great pleasure to talk to you. Fantastic stories you've told and learned so much about your business. But thank you for coming on.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Oh, my goodness, those stories. Tupac is a storyteller. I just absolutely loved the time we spent talking about his entrepreneurial childhood experiences were just extreme, and they continued through college and but man, what a business he has built. I love the fact that his back house operations is in Costa Rica, and they're really growing and growing and growing. 5 or 10 years down the road, they're going to be a much, much different organization. And we wish him continued success, to him and Laturo. So we thank him for coming in. We appreciate you guys watching, and we'll catch you next time. We would like to thank our title sponsor, B1 Bank. They can be found online at b1bank.com. The Next Entrepreneur is produced by Propel Productions. You can find more information at propelyourstory.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the Next Entrepreneur podcast and hit the bell for notifications. You can also follow us on social media. The links are in the description below.